They say the moment before death reveals who you truly are, not who you pretended to be, not who others wanted you to be, but the raw truth of your soul. Lyra discovered this as she lay bleeding in the snow, her arms wrapped around a whimpering wolf cub, while its would-be killers circled closer. She'd spent her whole life being called weak, worthless, a burden to her pack, yet here she was, using her final heartbeats to shield a creature smaller and more helpless than herself. That's when the Alpha King arrived, and everything she thought she knew about strength, power, and her own worth shattered like ice. The hunting party found them at dawn, a human woman frozen nearly solid, curled around a pure white wolf cub in a hollowed-out tree trunk. Blood had pooled and frozen beneath her, turning the virgin snow a dark crimson. Her lips were blue, her brown skin ashen with death's approach. But somehow, impossibly, her chest still rose and fell in shallow, stuttering breaths. The cub whined pitifully, pressing its tiny body against hers, seeking warmth that had long since fled. "She's still alive," breathed Theron, the youngest hunter, reaching toward them. "Don't touch her." The command cut through the frigid air like a blade. Alpha King Kalen emerged from the tree line, his presence making the very forest seem to hold its breath. He stood taller than any wolf in their true form, broader than any in human shape. His silver eyes, the mark of ancient alpha blood, swept over the scene with an intensity that made his hunting party step back instinctively. But Kalen's gaze fixed on the dying woman, and something shifted in his expression. He knew her. Lyra Moonweaver, the Omega who couldn't shift properly, the one whose wolf was so weak it could barely surface, making her half-transformation grotesque and painful to witness. He'd seen her once, years ago, at a pack gathering cowering in corners, serving drinks while others danced, her eyes downcast, as her own family pretended she didn't exist. The weakest wolf in the Northern Territories was dying to protect his son. 3 days earlier, Lyra had been gathering winter herbs near the frozen stream, when she'd heard it a high, desperate cry that spoke directly to something deep in her malformed wolf's soul. She'd found the white cub trapped in a hunter's snare, its leg twisted at an unnatural angle, abandoned by its pack, or perhaps orphaned. She should have left it, that's what her father would have said. "You can barely keep yourself alive, Lyra. You're no protector. You're barely even a wolf." But when the cub's golden eyes met hers, eyes that held too much intelligence for such a young wolf, she saw her own abandonment reflected back. Her twisted fingers, caught between human and wolf form during her failed shifts, worked carefully to free the creature. She'd wrapped it in her own cloak, sharing what little warmth her weak body could produce. Then the rogues had come, 3 of them, drawn by the scent of injured prey and weak wolf. Lyra had done the only thing she could. She'd run, clutching the cub to her chest, using every bit of knowledge she had of these woods to stay ahead. But rogues were persistence hunters, and her malformed body couldn't maintain the pace. When they'd finally cornered her, she'd made her choice. She'd curled around the cub in the hollow of an ancient tree, using her body as a shield, as their claws raked across her back, her arms, her shoulders. She'd bitten one when he'd tried to grab the cub, her human teeth barely breaking skin but surprising him enough to buy seconds. She'd taken every blow meant for the small life in her arms. Even as her blood painted the snow red, even as the cold numbed her extremities, she'd held on. Because sometimes, the only meaning a worthless life could have was in how it chose to end. "Don't let her die here," Kalen commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Bring them both to the castle." His beta, Wraith, stepped forward cautiously. "My lord, she's an Omega who can barely shift. She won't survive the journey." She survived 3 rogues. Kalen's silver eyes flashed dangerously. She protected my heir when his own guards failed to find him. She will not die in this forest like an animal. The truth of Prince Ashwin's disappearance had been kept secret. The white cub, Kalen's 8-year-old son, cursed to remain in wolf form until his 16th birthday had vanished 3 nights ago during a border skirmish. His guards had been found dead, and Kalen had assumed the worst. Yet here was his son, alive because a malformed Omega had given everything to protect him. They carried Lyra to the northern citadel, the fortress that rose from the mountain like a fang of black stone. The healers worked through the night, pumping warmth back into her frozen body, stitching wounds that would have killed a human but might spare a wolf, even a broken one like her. "She's fighting," the head healer, Elena, told Kalen as he stood vigil outside the healing chambers. "I don't understand how. Her wolf is twisted, barely there. She should have died hours ago." Through the cracked door, Kalen could see her thrashing in fevered dreams, her body attempting to shift but failing, caught in that agonizing space between forms. He'd seen it before in wolves, whose spirits were broken by trauma, the wolf retreating so far that transformation became torture. Ashwin refused to leave her side. The white cub curled against her hip, a tiny guardian returning the protection she'd given him. When the healers tried to remove him, he bared his tiny fangs and howled a sound that should have been laughable from such a small creature, but carried an echo of alpha command that made even seasoned wolves step back. "Like father, like son," Wraith muttered, but Kalen heard the approval in his beta's voice. On the 3rd day, Lyra's eyes opened. Not the dramatic awakening of fairy tales, but a slow, painful return to consciousness. The first thing she saw was the white cub pressed against her side, golden eyes watching her with an intensity that seemed impossible for such a young wolf. "Hello, little one," she whispered, her voice cracked like old leather. "You're safe now. As are you." Lyra's gaze snapped to the corner where Kalen stood, having maintained his vigil for 3 days. In the Northern Territories, everyone knew of the Alpha King, the wolf who'd united the fractured packs through strength and cunning, who'd never taken a mate, despite countless offers, whose power was matched only by his isolation. She tried to sit up, to bow, but her body wouldn't cooperate. "Your Majesty, you saved my son." He moved closer, and she could see the exhaustion etched into his perfect features. "The healers say you should have died. That your wolf is too damaged to have survived those wounds." The shame flooded through her. Even here, even after everything, she was still the broken Omega. "I'm sorry, my wolf is..." "Your wolf is stronger than any I've known." His words stopped her cold. "Strength isn't measured in the perfection of your shift, Lyra Moonweaver. It's measured in what you're willing to sacrifice for those who cannot protect themselves." The white cub nuzzled closer to her, a soft whine escaping him that somehow conveyed more gratitude than words ever could. "What's his name?" Lyra asked, stroking the soft white fur. "Ashwin," Kalen replied, and she saw his composure crack slightly. He's been trapped in that form for 4 years, since he was 4 years old." The weight of that revelation settled over her. This wasn't just any cub, this was the crown prince, cursed and silent, unable to speak or shift back to his human form. And she'd protected him without knowing, without expectation of reward, simply because he'd needed help. The great hall fell silent when Lyra entered, leaning heavily on a walking staff the healers had given her. Conversations died mid-sentence, as hundreds of eyes turned toward the limping Omega, who'd somehow earned a place at the Alpha King's table. She kept her gaze down, counting each painful step across the polished obsidian floor. Her body still bore the evidence of her ordeal: bandages, visible beneath the simple dress they'd given her, bruises, painting her exposed skin in shades of purple and yellow. But it was her presence itself that drew stares. Omegas didn't dine in the great hall, as broken Omegas. Who couldn't shift properly certainly didn't sit near the throne. Breathe, a small voice said beside her. Lyra looked down to find a girl of perhaps 13, with the same silver eyes as the Alpha King but softer features. Princess Mira, Kaelin's daughter, whose mother had died in childbirth. The girl took Lyra's free hand without hesitation. Father says you're the bravest wolf in the territories, Mira whispered conspiratorially. Is it true you fought 3 rogues without shifting? I didn't exactly fight, Lyra admitted quietly. You won, though. That's what matters. Mira guided her to a chair that had been placed at the royal family's table, ignoring the gasps from the court. Ashwin won't eat unless you're here. He's been very stubborn. Indeed. The white cub sat by an untouched bowl of meat, his golden eyes fixed on Lyra with unwavering intensity. When she finally sat, he immediately began eating, as if her presence alone made him feel safe. This is inappropriate. Someone hissed from a nearby table. Lady Corvina, a pure-blood alpha from the Eastern Territories, made no effort to lower her voice. An Omega who can't even shift properly, dining with royalty? What message does this send? It sends the message that I value courage over bloodline. Kaelin's voice cut through the whispers like a blade through silk. He entered from the side entrance, dressed in formal black that made his silver eyes seem to glow. Unless you'd prefer to discuss your own courage, Lady Corvina. Perhaps you'd like to share how many royal heirs you've saved recently. The lady's face flushed red, but she wisely stayed silent. Kaelin took his seat at the head of the table, Ashwin immediately padding over to curl at his father's feet. Eat, he commanded Lyra gently. You need strength. She picked up her spoon with trembling fingers, hyper-aware of every movement being watched and judged. The soup was rich, warming her from the inside, but she could barely taste it through her anxiety. Tell me about yourself, Kaelin said, his tone conversational, but carrying that underlying command that made him king. Your family must be worried. Kaelin said has intelligence. Kaelin has intelligence. Kaelin has intelligence. Kaelin has intelligence, said. Lyra almost laughed. Worried? Her family had been relieved when she'd left to gather herbs, and hadn't returned. One less mouth to feed, one less embarrassment to explain. I have no family, Your Majesty, she said carefully. My parents died when I was young. The Riverside Pack took me in, but... She trailed off, unwilling to admit how they'd treated her. But they saw your shifting difficulties as weakness. Kaelin finished, his jaw tightening. Fools. The Riverside Pack will answer for their treatment of you. Please no, Lyra said quickly, then caught herself. One didn't contradict the Alpha King. I mean, they gave me shelter. That was more than required. Their thing. Kaelin studied her for a long moment. You defend those who abandoned you. Why? Because I'm used to being abandoned, she thought but didn't say. Instead, she simply lowered her gaze, unable to find words that wouldn't sound pathetic. You'll stay here, Kaelin declared suddenly. As Ashwin's guardian, he clearly trusts you, and that's rare. The hall erupted in whispers, but one look from their king silenced them. Lyra's eyes widened. Your Majesty, I couldn't. I'm not qualified. You protected him with your life when you thought he was just a lost cub, Kaelin interrupted. That's the only qualification I need. Your scars tell stories, Princess Mira said, tracing a finger near but not quite touching the claw marks on Lyra's forearm. They sat in the castle's solarium, afternoon light streaming through stained glass windows that painted rainbow patterns across the floor. It had been 2 weeks since Lyra's arrival, and somehow the young princess had attached herself to the Omega with fierce devotion. Every morning, Mira would appear at Lyra's door, silver eyes bright with plans for the day. "This one looks like a crescent moon," Mira continued, examining Lyra's hand. "Did you get it fighting monsters?" "Something like that," Lyra said softly, remembering the day her wolf had tried to emerge during her first heat. The transformation had gone wrong, leaving her trapped between forms for hours, her own claws tearing into her flesh as she'd writhed in agony. "Mira, you're bothering our guest." Kaylin's deep voice came from the doorway. "I'm not bothering her, am I, Lyra?" Mira looked up with those impossibly large eyes that could melt the coldest heart. "Never," Lyra assured her, surprised to find she meant it. The little princess was one of the few people who didn't look at her with pity or disgust. Kaylin entered the room, Ashwin padding beside him in his eternal wolf form. The curse that kept the young prince trapped was a closely guarded secret, but Lyra had pieced together enough from overheard conversations. "A witch's revenge," they whispered. "Payment for some ancient slight against her coven by Kaylin's father." "I need to speak with Miss Moonweaver privately," Kaylin said, though his tone was gentle. Mira huffed but obediently left, though not before hugging Lyra tightly. "We're still having tea tomorrow," she declared before disappearing down the hall. Powerwin immediately took his sister's place, pressing against Lyra's leg. She'd grown used to his constant presence, the way he followed her everywhere, as if afraid she might disappear. "He's never been this attached to anyone," Kaylin observed, sitting across from her. In the afternoon light, she could see the exhaustion he carefully hid from his court. Not even his nursemaids before the curse. "He's a special boy," Lyra said, running her fingers through Ashwin's white fur. "Even in this form, his soul shines through." "You don't ask about the curse?" Kaylin noted. "Everyone else who learns of it immediately wants to know the details, the drama of it all." Lyra met his silver gaze steadily. "The why doesn't matter. He's a child who needs love and protection. That's all that matters." Something shifted in Kaylin's expression, a warmth that made him look younger, less like the fearsome alpha king, and more like a father who'd spent 4 years watching his son trapped in fur and silence. "How?" "The healers say you're well enough to leave," he said abruptly. "If you wish." The words hit her like cold water. Of course. She'd served her purpose, saved the prince. There was no reason for a broken Omega to remain in the castle, eating their food, taking up space. "I understand," she said, proud when her voice didn't shake. "I'll gather my things." "You misunderstand." Kaylin leaned forward. "I'm offering you a choice. You may leave with a purse of gold and my eternal gratitude. Or..." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You could stay, as Ashwin's guardian. Dot in that man. Extend." Lyra's breath caught. "But I'm just an Omega who can't even shift properly. Surely there are stronger wolves." "He doesn't need stronger. He needs someone who understands what it's like to be trapped in a form that doesn't fit. Someone patient enough to love him as he is, not as others think he should be." His words hung between them, heavy with meaning that went beyond just Ashwin's situation. "I'll stay," she whispered, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere. The first assassination attempt came on a moonless night. Lyra woke to Ashwin's growl, not the playful sound he made during their games, but something primal and terrified. Her eyes snapped open to find a figure looming over the prince's bed, silver blade gleaming in the darkness. She didn't think. Her body moved on instinct, throwing herself between the assassin and the white cub. The blade meant for Ashwin's heart caught her shoulder instead, sending fire through her nerves. "Guards!" she screamed, but the assassin was already moving for a second strike. This time, something inside Lyra snapped, not broke, but snapped into place. Her wolf, the twisted, malformed creature that had hidden deep inside her for so long, suddenly surged forward with desperate purpose. The shift was agony. Her bones cracked and reformed wrong, her skin stretched in ways it shouldn't. What emerged wasn't the sleek wolf form of a proper shifter, but something caught between hunched, with one arm still partially human, patches of fur sprouting randomly, her jaw elongated but not fully transformed. She was monstrous. She was terrifying. She was exactly what Ashwin needed her to be. The assassin stumbled back in horror at the sight of her malformed shape. That moment of hesitation was enough. Lyra lunged with her partial claws, raking them across his mask, sending him crashing into the wall. Guards flooded the room, but the assassin had already vanished through the window, leaving only blood and his abandoned blade behind. Lyra collapsed, her body convulsing as it tried to shift back. The transformation had torn things inside her that weren't meant to tear. Blood seeped from countless internal wounds. Lyra. Mira's scream echoed down the hallway as the princess ran into the room, having heard the commotion. But it was Kalen who reached her first, his hands impossibly gentle as he gathered her writhing form. "Stop fighting it," he commanded, alpha power lacing his voice. "Let it go. Let the wolf go." She wanted to obey, but her wolf wouldn't retreat. It had finally emerged to protect Ashwin, and now it didn't know how to return to hiding. "Please," she gasped through her deformed muzzle. "Can't change back." Kalen did something unexpected then. He partially shifted himself, not fully, but just enough that his own wolf could reach hers. His claws extended, his eyes went full silver, and he pressed his forehead to hers. "You're safe," he rumbled, his voice carrying both human words and wolf meaning. "Ashwin is safe. You protected him. You can rest now." Slowly, agonizingly, her body began to return to its human form. When it was over, she was sobbing against Kalen's chest, her shoulder bleeding freely, her entire body feeling like it had been turned inside out. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," he whispered into her hair. "And the most beautiful." She laughed bitterly through her tears. "Beautiful? I'm a monster. You saw what I become, neither wolf nor human, just wrong." "You're perfect," he said fiercely. "Your wolf emerged when it was needed most, in whatever form it could manage. That's not weakness, Lyra. That's the purest kind of strength." And the investigation revealed the assassin had been hired by Lord Thane of the Eastern Territories, who believed his daughter should marry Kalen and saw the cursed prince as an obstacle. "He'll strike again," Wraith warned during the council meeting Lyra had been asked to attend. "Now that he knows the prince is vulnerable." "The prince is not vulnerable," Kalen interrupted, his gaze finding Lyra across the table. "He has a guardian who would tear herself apart to protect him. Power." "With respect, my lord," Lord Thane's representative said smoothly. "One malformed Omega against trained assassins." And temperature in the room dropped. Kalen's power rolled out like a physical force, making every wolf present bare their throat in submission. "That malformed Omega is under my protection," he said, each word deliberate. "An attack on her is an attack on me. Make sure Lord Thane understands this." Later that night, Lyra sat by Ashwin's bed, her shoulder bandaged, her body still aching from the forced transformation. The white cub hadn't left her side since the attack. "I'm sorry," she whispered to him. "I know I'm not the guardian you deserve. Someone stronger, someone who could shift properly." Ashwin pressed his head against her hand, a soft whine escaping him. And for the first time, she could have sworn she heard something else. A whisper in her mind, faint as morning mist. "You're perfect. No, tell me a story." Ashwin's young voice whispered in Lyra's mind. She nearly dropped the book she was reading. After a month of caring for him, she'd gotten used to the white cub's silent presence, his expressive golden eyes, his playful yips. But this was impossible. "Ashwin," she whispered, looking around the empty library. "Did you just... You can hear me." His mental voice was filled with joy. "I've been trying for so long, but nobody could hear me. Not even Father. But you can." Tears streamed down Lyra's face as she gathered the cub into her arms. "Oh, sweet boy, you've been trying to talk all this time?" "The curse," his voice turned sad. "It took my human form and my voice. But with you it's different. Maybe because your wolf is different too?" She held him tighter. 4 years old when he was cursed, now 8, he'd spent half his life trapped in silence. "What story would you like?" "Tell me about the girl who couldn't shift right but saved the prince anyway," he requested, tail wagging slightly. So she did, weaving a tale of courage and unconventional strength. As she spoke, she felt Kalen's presence in the doorway. How long had he been standing there, watching them? "She can hear him," Kalen said roughly to Mira, who appeared beside him. "Somehow, she can hear him." And that night, Kalen summoned her to his private study. The room was surprisingly warm, filled with books and personal touches she hadn't expected from the cold Alpha King persona he presented to the world. "Power. Ashwin told you about the curse," he said. "It wasn't a question, problem. Only that it took his voice and form," Lyra replied carefully. Kalen poured himself wine, offering her a glass which she accepted with trembling hands. "My father was a cruel man. He hurt many people, destroyed entire covens of witches because he feared their power. When I took the throne, one of those witches came seeking revenge. He stared into the fire. She said the sins of the father would be visited upon the son. But not me, my son. My innocent boy who'd done nothing wrong. He would be trapped as a beast until someone could love him truly, completely, despite his cursed form." "Pays. That's why you've never taken a queen," Lyra said softly. "You've been searching for someone who could break his curse. Every woman I brought here saw him as a burden or a tool for power. They'd pretend affection, but he could sense their disgust, their fear." His hands clenched. "Then you arrived, bleeding and broken, still trying to protect him. You didn't even know who he was. He was a cub who needed help. That's all that mattered." Kalen turned to face her fully. "You can hear him, Lyra. In 100 attempts, through dozens of powerful witches and healers, no one has been able to communicate with him. But you can. Maybe because I understand what it's like," she said quietly. "To be trapped in a body that doesn't work right, to have others look at you and see only what's wrong, not who you are inside. There's something else." Kalen moved closer. "The witch left a second part to the curse, one I've never told anyone. Not only must someone love him despite his form, but..." He paused, vulnerability flickering across his features. "I must also learn to love someone who the world considers broken. Only then will both curses break his and mine." "Both curses?" Lyra's brow furrowed. Kalen smiled bitterly. "Did you think it was natural for an alpha king to never take a mate? To feel nothing when perfect she-wolves threw themselves at me? The witch cursed my heart to feel nothing, until I could see beauty where others saw only flaws." The weight of his confession hung between them. Lyra's heart raced as understanding dawned. "That's why you look at me like that," she whispered, like I'm not broken. Because you're not, he said firmly. You're the most whole person I've ever met. Your body might not shift properly, but your soul is magnificent. Before she could respond, Ashwin's voice echoed in her mind, and she knew from Kalen's sudden stillness that he'd heard it too this time. Tell father he should kiss you. That's what happens in all the stories when the prince realizes he loves someone. Both adults turned bright red, and despite everything, the curses, the assassination attempts, the weight of their positions, they laughed. The full moon ceremony arrived, with all the pomp the Northern Territories could muster. Every pack leader within 300 miles had come to pay respects to the Alpha King and witness the traditional hunt. What they didn't expect was to see Lyra standing at the royal platform, dressed in the midnight blue reserved for the king's family. This is an insult, Lady Corvina hissed to her companions, not bothering to lower her voice. That creature can't even shift properly. She'll bring shame to the entire ceremony. Lyra kept her chin high, though each word cut deep. She knew what they saw, an Omega who didn't belong, a malformed wolf playing at being something more than she was. Let them whisper, Mira said fiercely, taking Lyra's hand. The princess had dressed in matching midnight blue, declaring herself Lyra's sister in all but blood. Ashwin pressed against Lyra's other side, his presence a comfort. Through their mental link, she heard his voice. They're all stupid. You're worth 100 of them. The ceremony traditionally began with all wolves shifting together under the full moon, a display of power and unity. Lyra's stomach churned. She'd have to attempt it, for Kalen's sake, even knowing what would happen. You don't have to do this, Kalen murmured beside her, but she could see the political pressure in his eyes. If she didn't at least try, it would be seen as weakness on his part for keeping her close. I can handle it, she lied. The moon reached its apex. Around them, hundreds of wolves began their transformation, smooth, elegant shifts that took seconds. Fur rippled over skin like water, bones reformed with practiced ease. Lyra closed her eyes and reached for her wolf. The pain was immediate and wrong. Her bones began to break but wouldn't set properly. Fur sprouted in patches, while other areas remained human. Her spine curved but didn't complete the change. She fell to her knees, a horrific sound escaping her partially formed muzzle. The gathering went silent, watching in horror and disgust as she writhed, stuck between forms. Some looked away, others watched with morbid fascination. Abomination, someone whispered. How can the Alpha King stand to look at it? Stop. The single word carried such alpha power that every wolf present, shifted or not, dropped to their bellies in submission. Kalen stood, his own transformation rippling through him but not into his wolf form. Instead, he held himself in that same painful space between forms that Lyra occupied, matching her imperfect state. This woman, he said, his voice carrying across the ceremony grounds, saved my son. She took an assassin's blade meant for him. She speaks to him when no one else can reach him through his curse. He moved to where Lyra struggled and gently helped her to her feet, supporting her malformed frame with his own partially shifted body. She is not an abomination, he continued. She is evolution. While you cling to the old ways, measuring worth by the smoothness of a shift, she shows us that strength comes in many forms. Her wolf emerges not for show, not for tradition, but when innocents need protecting. That is true power. Still supporting Lyra, he addressed Lady Corvina directly. You shift beautifully, Lady Corvina. Your wolf form is flawless. Tell me, how many times have you risked that perfect form to save another? How many assassins have you fought? How many cursed children have you comforted? The lady's silence was damning. Anyone who cannot accept my chosen guardian is welcome to leave my territory, Kaelin announced. But know this, Lyra, Moonweaver stands under my protection and carries my complete trust. Disrespect her, and you disrespect me. Slowly, Lyra felt her body settling back into human form. The partial shift receded, leaving her exhausted but whole. Kaelin's own form normalized as well, though he kept his arm around her waist. "My lord," she whispered, "you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he cut her off gently. "It's time they learned that perfection isn't about meeting their narrow standards." Through their link, Ashwin's voice rang clear. "Father just declared to everyone that he loves you. Even I understood that, and I'm 8. Lyra's cheeks burned, but Kaelin just smiled, having heard his son's observation too. "Prosters. Out of the mouths of cubs," he murmured, and for a moment, the weight of curses and politics fell away, leaving just two people standing beneath the moon, seeing each other clearly. "You're falling in love with her," Wraith observed, finding Kaelin on the castle's highest balcony where the Alpha King went when he needed to think. It had been 3 months since Lyra's arrival, and the castle had transformed. Servants smiled more. Mira's laughter echoed through halls that had been silent for years. Even the ever-stoic guards softened when they saw Lyra coaxing Ashwin through his exercises, teaching him to communicate through their unique mental link. "Is it that obvious?" Kaelin asked, not bothering to deny it. "You partially shifted in public to defend her. You've executed 3 nobles who spoke against her. You watch her when you think no one's looking, like she might disappear if you blink." Wraith leaned against the stone railing. "So yes, rather obvious. The curse has nothing to do with it," Wraith interrupted. "I've known you since we were pups. This isn't about breaking magic. You love her because she sees your children as treasures instead of burdens. Because she faces each day with quiet courage despite the pain. Because she's the first person in your life who wants nothing from you except perhaps your happiness." Kaelin was quiet for a long moment. She deserves better than a king who ignored suffering like hers for years. "I let the weak be crushed under the old traditions because it was easier than fighting for change." "Then be better," Wraith said simply. "Start now." That evening, Kaelin found Lyra in what had become her favorite spot, the garden where Ashwin could run freely while she tended to the herbs she'd started growing. The white wolf cub was chasing butterflies, his joy palpable through the mental link she'd taught Kaelin to sense, if not fully access. "You're troubled," she said without looking up from the sage she was pruning. She'd learned to read him these past months, seeing through his kingly mask to the man beneath. "Lord Thane has formally requested an audience," he said. "He wants to negotiate a marriage alliance with his daughter." Lyra's hand stilled on the plants. "Lady Corvina is beautiful, powerful. She would strengthen your political position." "She also called you an abomination." Question. "Many agree with her assessment." Lyra's voice was carefully neutral, but he caught the hurt beneath it. Kaelin moved closer, close enough that her herb-scented warmth reached him. "I've made my position clear. You are under my protection." "Protection," she repeated softly. "Is that all I am to you? A responsibility?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Before he could answer, Ashwin bounded over, covered in dirt and emanating pure happiness. "Father, Lyra taught me a new game," the cub said through their partial link. "Watch." The moment shattered, but the question remained in Lyra's eyes. That night, unable to sleep, Lyra wandered the castle halls. Her shoulder ached, it always did when storms approached, the assassin's blade having left damage that couldn't fully heal in her imperfect form. She found herself in the portrait gallery, studying the long line of Alpha Kings, all powerful, all perfect, all properly mated to equally perfect queens. My mother wasn't perfect. Lyra jumped, finding Mira had followed her. The princess was supposed to be asleep. She was human, Mira continued, moving to stand before a portrait of a woman with kind eyes and Mira's delicate features. That's why there's no official portrait of her here, just this one father had painted in secret. The council was furious when he took a human mate, said it would weaken the bloodline. But she was your mother. She gave him heirs. She gave him love, Mira corrected. Real love, not the political arrangements they wanted. Father says she made him better, made him want to be worthy of her trust. The princess looked up at Lyra. You do the same thing. Mira, I'm not. You are, the girl said firmly. And he's an idiot if he lets Lord Thane or anyone else convince him otherwise. From the shadows, Kaelin listened to his daughter's fierce defense of the woman who'd become the heart of their family. His clever, observant child had seen what he'd been too afraid to fully acknowledge. He loved Lyra, not because of a curse, not because she could hear his son, but because she was herself brave, kind, and unbroken despite everything the world had tried to do to her. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would tell her. Tomorrow he would ask her to be more than Ashwin's guardian, more than his protected guest. Tomorrow, he would ask her to be his queen. Power. He didn't know that tomorrow, Lord Thane would make his move. The announcement came at dawn, delivered by Lord Thane himself, with barely concealed triumph. The Council of Alphas has voted, he declared to the assembled court. Given the Alpha King's unusual attachment to a defective Omega, we invoke the right of challenge. Either His Majesty takes a proper queen within the lunar month, or he faces formal challenge for his throne. Lyra felt the blood drain from her face. The right of challenge was ancient law. If enough alphas deemed a king unfit, they could force him to defend his crown through combat or compliance. Kylan's expression was stone, but she saw his claws extend slightly. You dare, quote, we dare because we must. Lady Corvina stepped forward, dressed in ceremonial robes that suggested this had been long planned. The Northern Territories need stable leadership. A king who publicly claims a malformed Omega undermines our entire structure. Then I'll take the challenges, Kaelin said coldly. All of them. Father, no! Mira rushed forward, but Wraith held her back. Lord Thane smiled. That's your right, of course. Face 7 challengers in succession. Risk your throne, your life, your children's future, or simply take a proper queen. Prasanna. My daughter remains willing. Lyra couldn't breathe. 7 challengers. Even for an alpha king, those odds were lethal. She stood abruptly, every eye turning to her. I'll leave, she said quietly. This conflict exists because of me. If I go, you'll go nowhere, Kaelin commanded, his alpha power making her knees weak. This isn't about you, Lyra. It's about power, control, and fear of change. It's about the natural order, Lord Thane corrected. Wolves mate with wolves, properly formed wolves who can bear proper heirs. Not. He gestured dismissively at Lyra. Whatever she is. Ashwin suddenly appeared between Lyra and Lord Thane, his small form trembling with rage. His growl was high-pitched but fierce, and for a moment, just a moment, Lyra could have sworn she saw the shadow of the powerful alpha he would become. That night, Lyra made her decision. She found Kaelin in his study, poring over ancient texts about the right of challenge. There's another way, she said softly. He looked up, exhaustion written across his features. Lyra, marry Lady Corvina. The words hung between them like a blade. Kaelin was on his feet instantly, crossing to her in 2 strides. Never, he growled. Listen to me, she pleaded. Marry her. Secure your throne. Keep your children safe. I'll stay as Ashwin's guardian. Nothing has to change. Everything would change. His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his silver eyes. How can you stand there and ask me to take another woman to my bed when you're the only one He stopped, jaw clenching. The only one you what? She whispered. The only one I love, he finished roughly. Curse or no curse, broken or whole, wolf or human, I love you, Lyra Moonweaver. Her tears came freely then. And I love you. That's why I'm begging you to let me go. Your children need their father alive more than I need. He kissed her. It was desperate, possessive, and achingly tender all at once. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. I have a better plan, he said against her lips, but I need you to trust me. The night of the challenge arrived, the great arena, carved from the mountain itself, filled with wolves from every territory. 7 challengers stood ready, each an alpha in their own right, each hungry for the throne. Kalen entered alone. No armor, no weapons, just the power of his wolf and his will. But before the first challenge could begin, he raised his hand. I invoke the mate's right, he announced, his voice echoing off stone walls. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The mate's right was even older than the right of challenge, a law stating that an alpha's chosen mate could stand as proxy in formal challenges. But you have no mate, Lord Thane protested. I do. Kalen smiled, sharp and dangerous. Lyra Moonweaver is my chosen mate, my equal in all things. She has the right to face these challenges in my stead or beside me, as she chooses. This is absurd, Lady Corvina shrieked. She can barely shift power. Then defeating her should be easy, Kalen countered. Unless you're afraid of facing a broken Omega? The trap was perfectly set. To refuse would be to admit fear. To accept would mean facing someone they'd all dismissed as worthless. Lyra stepped forward, understanding Kalen's plan. I choose to face them, she said, her voice carrying across the arena. All 7, if necessary. The arena fell silent as Lyra stepped forward. She wore no armor, only a simple tunic and pants that wouldn't restrict her movement. Her chin was high, but Kalen could see the tremor in her hands. I invoke the proxy right, she announced, her voice carrying surprising strength. I will face the first challenger. Lord Thane laughed, cruel and mocking. You can't be serious. You'll die in seconds. Then you have nothing to worry about, she replied calmly. The first challenger was Victor Stoneclaw, a massive alpha from the eastern reaches. He shifted immediately into his wolf form, huge, black as night, muscles rippling under glossy fur. The crowd made appreciative noises at the display of power. Lyra closed her eyes and reached for her wolf. The transformation was agonizing, as always. Bones broke and reformed incorrectly. Fur sprouted in patches, eyes. When it finished, she stood there, a malformed creature caught between human and wolf, hunched and twisted. The crowd's disgust was palpable. Some laughed. Others turned away. Victor attacked without hesitation, expecting an easy victory. His jaws snapped where Lyra had been, but she wasn't there anymore. Her twisted form, ugly as it was, moved in ways a normal wolf couldn't. She bent at angles that should have been impossible, dodged in patterns that made no sense. She's not fighting like a wolf, Wraith observed from beside the throne. She's fighting like nothing I've ever seen. Because she had learned to work with her body instead of against it. Every malformation, every painful twist, she'd studied them, understood them, turned them into advantages. Where a normal wolf moved predictably, she moved like water, like smoke, like something from nightmares. Victor grew frustrated, then angry, then desperate. His attacks became wilder, more vicious. But Lyra remained calm, dodging, weaving, waiting. Then she saw her opening. As Victor lunged for what he thought was her exposed throat, she twisted in a way that would have snapped a normal spine. Her partially human hand, still equipped with opposable thumbs, grabbed his ear. Her wolf claws, extended from fingers that shouldn't exist in that form, found the pressure point she'd studied in anatomy texts. Victor collapsed, paralyzed but alive. The arena erupted in chaos. Impossible! She cheated. What is she? She is magnificent, Kaelin said loudly, pride evident in every word. She is evolution. She is adaptation. She is proof that strength isn't about meeting your narrow definitions of perfection. Asked, Lyra's form slowly, painfully returned to human. She stood over the paralyzed Victor, breathing hard but victorious. Next challenger, she called out. But before anyone could step forward, Ashwin broke free from Mira's hold and raced into the arena. The white cub ran to Lyra, and as he pressed against her legs, something extraordinary happened. Light exploded from both of them. Not harsh or blinding, but warm, golden, alive. The crowd gasped as Ashwin's form began to change, not painfully like Lyra's transformations, but smoothly, naturally. Where the white cub had stood, a small boy now knelt, 8 years old, with his father's silver eyes and strong features, but with something else, a gentleness, a wisdom beyond his years. Lyra, he said, his actual voice rough from disuse. You broke it. You broke the curse. She fell to her knees, gathering him into her arms as tears streamed down her face. How? The witch said someone had to love me despite my cursed form, Ashwin explained, his thin arms wrapping around her neck. But also, I had to see someone I love accept their own cursed form. You didn't fight despite being broken, you fought because of it. You showed me that different doesn't mean less than. The arena had gone completely silent. Even Lord Thane seemed struck speechless. Kaelin entered the arena, his own eyes suspiciously bright as he knelt beside them, pulling both Lyra and his son into his embrace. The challenges are withdrawn, Victor Stoneclaw said, having regained movement. He bowed deeply to Lyra. Anyone who can defeat me with such unconventional skill, who can break a curse that dozens of powerful witches couldn't touch. You have my respect and my allegiance. One by one, the other challengers knelt, but Lord Thane remained standing, his face purple with rage. This proves nothing, he roared. She's still a malformed creature who cannot provide heirs. She's provided something more valuable. Kaelin stood, helping Lyra to her feet while Ashwin clung to her hand. She's shown us a new way forward. This changes nothing, Lord Thane roared. She's still a malformed Omega who cannot bear heirs. The bloodline ends with her. Before anyone could respond, Mira stepped forward. At 13, she already carried herself with the authority of a future queen. The bloodline continues through me, she said clearly. And through Ashwin. We don't need Lyra to bear children. We need her to be our mother, which she already is in every way that matters. A touching sentiment, Lady Corvinus sneered, though her position had clearly weakened. But sentiment doesn't secure political alliances or strengthen pack bonds. No, Kaelin agreed, standing slowly. But evolution does. He gestured to the arena floor where Lyra's blood had spilled during her transformation. Where each drop had fallen, something extraordinary was happening. Flowers were blooming, not ordinary flowers, but silver-petaled things that seemed to pulse with their own light. Moon blossoms, breathed an elderly wolf from the crowd. but they've been extinct for centuries. Legend says they only grow where great sacrifice meets pure love. Lyra's blood, her imperfect, malformed blood, has awakened something we thought lost forever, Kaelin announced. How many other gifts have we destroyed in our pursuit of a narrow definition of perfection? How much magic have we killed by declaring it defective? He moved to stand beside Lyra, who was still holding Ashwin, the boy clinging to her as if afraid she might disappear. I name Lyra Moonweaver as my mate, my queen, and the mother of my children, Kaelin declared formally. Any who challenge this decision challenge me directly, and unlike my mate, I won't show mercy. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. But more importantly, the crowd was beginning to shift. Whispers rippled through the arena, not of disgust, but of awe. She broke the curse, defeated an alpha in single combat, made the moon blossoms bloom. Lord Thane made one last desperate attempt. The council will never... The council will adapt, a new voice interrupted. Elder Sage, the oldest and most respected alpha in the territories, stepped forward. Or it will be replaced. The world changes, Thane. Those who refuse to change with it get left behind. She approached Lyra slowly, studying her with ancient eyes. Show me your wolf again, child. Lyra hesitated, but Kaelin squeezed her shoulder encouragingly. She reached for her wolf, and the now familiar agony washed through her. But this time, something was different. The transformation still hurt, still twisted her into that impossible form, but she felt stronger, more stable. Elder Sage circled her slowly, examining every imperfect angle, every impossible joint. Do you know what you are? The elder asked finally. Lyra shook her head, unable to speak in this form. You're a bridge, Elder Sage announced. Once every 1,000 years, one is born a wolf who exists between forms to show us new paths of evolution. The last bridge founded the Northern Territories. They were also called malformed, defective, broken. History renamed them revolutionary. As Lyra shifted back, exhausted but triumphant, Lord Thane made his final mistake. In his rage and humiliation, he pulled a concealed blade iron, not silver, meant to poison rather than kill cleanly. He lunged not at Lyra, but at Ashwin. Time seemed to slow. Lyra moved, but she was too far away, too exhausted from her transformations. The blade descended toward the boy who'd just regained his human form. Then Kaelin was there, catching the blade with his bare hand, the iron searing his palm. His other hand closed around Thane's throat. You just attempted to murder my son, Kaelin said, his voice deadly quiet. In front of hundreds of witnesses. Father, Ashwin said softly. Don't kill him. Everyone turned to stare at the boy. Lyra taught me that mercy isn't weakness, Ashwin continued, and that sometimes the greatest punishment isn't death, but living with the consequences of your actions. Ashwin, Kaelin, looked at his son, then at Lyra, who nodded slightly. With visible effort, he released Thane. You're stripped of your title, your lands, and your position in the council, Kaelin declared. You'll live as an Omega, at the bottom of the hierarchy you so viciously defended. Let's see how you fare under the system you championed. Guards dragged the broken lord away, and in that moment, everything changed. The old order hadn't just been challenged, it had been shattered and rebuilt. Long live the Queen, someone shouted from the crowd. Long live Queen Lyra, others took up the cry. But Lyra only had eyes for the two children, clinging to her one who'd found his voice, one who'd never stopped believing, and the man who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. 1 year later, the Great Hall had been transformed for the mating ceremony. Moon blossoms now growing throughout the castle grounds, from seeds of those first flowers wove through traditional wolfsbane and silver roses. The combination of extinct and common, magical and mundane, perfectly captured the union being celebrated. Lyra stood before the mirror in her chambers, barely recognizing herself. The wedding dress was a masterpiece of silver and midnight blue, but it wasn't the fine clothes that made her look different. It was the confidence in her posture, the peace in her eyes, the small smile that had become her default expression, rather than the careful blankness she'd worn for so many years. "You're beautiful," Mira said from the doorway. "Now 14, and growing more elegant each day. But you were beautiful before, too. Before the dress, before the title, before any of this." "When I was broken?" Lyra asked gently, knowing the girl needed to hear the answer. "You were never broken," Ashwin said, entering behind his sister. At 9, he was tall for his age, his time as a wolf having made him more graceful than most boys. "You were just waiting to bloom. Like the moon blossoms." A knock at the door interrupted them. Wraith entered, grinning. "The Alpha King is about to wear a hole in the floor from pacing. If you don't hurry, he might just come fetch you himself. Tradition be damned." Lyra laughed, the sound still surprising her sometimes. When had she learned to laugh so freely? The ceremony itself was unlike any mating ritual the Northern Territories had seen. Instead of the traditional hunt where the male pursued the female in wolf form, Kaelin and Lyra had chosen something different. They stood together in the courtyard, surrounded by every pack in the territory. As the moon rose, they both began to shift, but slowly, deliberately, holding the space between forms that Lyra had taught Kaelin to navigate. Together, they existed in that impossible middle ground, neither fully human nor fully wolf. And in that space, they danced. It should have been grotesque, two partially transformed beings moving together. Instead, it was hauntingly beautiful, a physical representation of meeting each other exactly as they were. When they finally returned to human form, the gathered wolves howled their approval, a sound that echoed across the mountains and would be remembered in stories for generations. But the true surprise came during the feast. "I have an announcement." "The pack healer," Elena said, approaching the head table where Lyra and Kaelin sat with their children. "Your Majesty, might I examine you briefly?" Lyra frowned but offered her hand. The healer's eyes went wide as her magic touched Lyra's essence. "Impossible," she breathed. "What?" Kaelin was on his feet instantly, protective. "Your Majesty is with child, twins." The hall erupted. Lyra's hand went to her stomach in shock. "But I was barren. The healers in my old pack confirmed it multiple times." "You were barren when you believed you were broken," Elena said thoughtfully. "But the body and spirit are connected in ways we don't fully understand. When you accepted yourself, when you found your true strength, perhaps your body healed in ways medical magic couldn't achieve." Kaelin pulled Lyra into his arms, both of them crying and laughing simultaneously. Mira and Ashwin joined the embrace, their family complete and growing. Later that night, as they stood on the balcony overlooking their territory, Lyra thought about that moment in the snow that had started everything. She'd been ready to die, protecting a stranger's cub, believing she had no value beyond that final sacrifice. "What are you thinking?" Kaelin asked, arms wrapped around her from behind, hands resting on her still flat stomach where their children grew. "I'm thinking about broken things," she said softly. "How sometimes they're not broken at all. They're just becoming something new, something the world hasn't seen before." "Like you?" "Like us," she corrected, turning in his arms. "A king who learned to see beyond perfection." A woman who learned to fight because of her flaws, not despite them. Children who teach us that love doesn't require blood or conventional forms. It's kind of, we're all beautifully imperfect. He kissed her then, under the moon that had witnessed her near death, her transformation, and now her triumph. In the distance, a wolf howled, young, uncertain, imperfect. Another malformed shifter, perhaps, struggling with their place in the world. Lyra smiled, already planning. The castle had plenty of room, and she had plenty of love to give. We should find them, she said. Whoever that is, bring them here. Of course we will, Kaelin agreed. After all, the broken ones make the strongest pack. As if in agreement, a moon blossom bloomed at their feet, its silver petals catching the moonlight. The extinct flower that grew from imperfect blood, proof that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most unexpected sources. Their story had begun with sacrifice and near death. It would continue with life, love, and the revolutionary idea that strength came not from perfection, but from the courage to be exactly who you were meant to be. The Alpha King had found his queen. The broken Omega had found her strength. And together, they would reshape the world, one beautiful imperfection at a time. The training grounds echoed with an unusual sound laughter, mixed with frustrated growls. Lyra watched from the observation deck as her latest student, a young wolf named Kieran, whose shift only affected half his body, attempted the defensive maneuver she'd been teaching. Don't fight against the asymmetry, she called down. Use it. Your opponents expect symmetrical movement. Disappoint them. At 5 years old, her twins were already showing signs of their unique heritage. Luna could partially shift at will, her hands becoming claws, while keeping human flexibility. Leo's gift was different. He could sense the pain of others' transformations, and somehow ease it, a healer's gift born from his mother's suffering. "Mama, look," Luna called, showing off her latest trick, one wolf ear and one human ear, letting her hear in frequencies others couldn't. Quote, "Magnificent little moon," Lyra praised, though she kept one eye on Kieran's progress. The Academy for Exceptional Shifters had been Kaelin's wedding gift to her, a place where those deemed defective by traditional standards could learn to harness their unique abilities. In 5 years, they'd trained 300 students. Some became the kingdom's most elite guards, their unconventional abilities making them unpredictable in battle. Others became healers, scholars, or artists, finding that their different perspectives led to innovations. "You've built something incredible," Kaelin said, joining her on the deck. Even after 5 years, her heart still skipped when he appeared. "We built it," she corrected, leaning into his warmth. Below, Kieran finally managed the maneuver, using his half-shifted form to bend at an impossible angle and disarm his opponent. His joy was infectious, spreading to the other students who cheered his success. "Another bridge," Kaelin observed. "Elder Sage says there have been more born in the last 5 years than in the previous century." "Maybe they were always there," Lyra suggested. "They just needed to see that being different could be a gift, not a curse." Ashwin, now 13, and already showing the powerful build of a future Alpha King, was helping with the younger students. His time as a wolf had given him patience and understanding beyond his years. Mira, 18, and recently mated to a scholar who appreciated her brilliant mind over her royal blood, was documenting the various forms of partial shifting for medical texts. "The world is changing," Kaelin said softly. "Good," Lyra replied. "It needed to." That night, as she tucked the twins into bed, Luna asked the question Lyra had been expecting. "Mama, why do some wolves still call you the Broken Queen?" Lyra sat on the edge of the bed, considering her answer. because some people think broken means worthless. But do you know what broken really means? Furry too. Both twins shook their heads. It means something that's been changed from its original form. Like, when we break ground to plant seeds, or break dawn to start a new day, I am broken beautifully, powerfully broken. And that breaking let me become something new, something needed. Like the moon blossoms? Leo asked. Exactly like the moon blossoms. After the children were asleep, Lyra found herself in the garden, where those first magical flowers had bloomed from her blood. They covered the entire courtyard now, their silver light gentle in the darkness. She thought about the woman she'd been rejected, barren, unable to shift properly. That woman had died in the snow, protecting a cub she didn't know was a prince. What rose in her place was something unprecedented, a bridge between worlds, a teacher of the unconventional, a mother to many, a queen who ruled through understanding rather than perfection. No regrets? Kaelin asked, finding her among the flowers. None, she said firmly. Every scar, every failed shift, every moment of pain led me here. Led me to you, to our children, to this life I never dared dream of. He pulled her close, and together, they watched as across the courtyard, a young student, one who could only shift their legs, practiced the running technique Lyra had developed specifically for their unique form. You saved more than just Ashwin that day in the snow, Kaelin murmured. You saved all of us from the prison of our own limited thinking. Lyra smiled, remembering the terrified woman who'd stood before a beast, convinced she was worthless. That woman had been wrong about so many things, but mostly about herself. She wasn't the weak link in the chain of evolution. She was the next step forward. And in the Northern Territories, under the light of the moon blossoms that grew from imperfect blood and perfect love, the definition of strength itself had been rewritten by a broken Omega who refused to be anything less than whole. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can be is exactly who you are, imperfections and all. The world doesn't need another perfect copy. It needs your unique truth, your different perspective, your beautiful brokenness that might just be the key to someone else's healing.